Hi all, the long-awaited TCEC Season 19 Superfinal is now underway at tcec-chess.com, well worth a visit. Over 1,000 are attending today in real time. It's amazing, the chat there. I'm going to show you the first really interesting game, in my view, that occurred. So, Leela was playing with the white pieces against Stockfish. So this is in round 5. It kicked off with e4. Jerome, who does the opening book, included here a French defense. We have a French defense. This was a favorite of past world champions like Tigran, who was quite often able to draw with many different flavors of the French defense. It suited his style, perhaps, closed positional, and he didn't like losing, so it seemed to do a good job for Tigran, Iron Tiger. Now, we have d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, e5, and we have a curious move here. The usual move is knight fd7, where black later attempts to undermine white's pawn chain. And I believe the French defense in general, even if you don't really use it that regularly, I believe you can learn a lot about pawn structure undermining and pawn chains in general. And John Watson did a fantastic landmark kind of classic book, Play the French, which I heartily recommend. In this game, we don't actually get knight fd7. We get an interesting alternative, knight g8. Now, Tigran has played this before. It's highly provocative, and those that are into opening principles, maybe a bit too enthusiastically, would say, oh, it's a pointless, non-developing move. White's ahead in development, black's going to get completely smashed. Yes, but we're not supercomputers, and quite often the French defense is an effective weapon. Certain grandmasters like Varuz and the Kobian still play it quite regularly with great success. So it's not like it's a busted opening, but this particular version of the French defense is a little bit on the more fragile side, perhaps. There is, though, a Tigran draw, which saw f4. This was Arnason, a 2460 grandmaster. Yes, not just a bunny. And Tigran aimed to exchange off the light square bishops like this. With bishop a6. It's a very logical thing to do. Statistically, with the white pawns on dark squares, black really wants to try and emphasize things like f5 without too much hassle. To exchange off this bishop seems to quite often a strategically routine thing to do, to weaken white further on the light squares. And that game went bishop takes, knight takes, bishop f2, c5, h3, c takes, knight takes, bishop b4. And here Tigran gave up his dark square bishop and actually put his knight back on g8. And here, according to the latest computers, white only had a small edge, and the game is kind of testimony to that black didn't get smashed. Tigran managed to draw in 46 moves from this position. So I think the opening is not a completely busted opening necessarily. So it's one to try in, especially online, for fun, this knight g8, kind of teasing. So one of the ideas is to reroute later the knight to use the f5 square, for example, like this or this, and get rid of, strategically, exchange off the light square bishops. So anyway, in this game, we see maybe a much stronger test of the whole concept with a3. It's a very curious move. Well, it stops bishop before the pinning move. But also later, if black plays for c5, maybe b4 would come in handy. So what happens here? We see b6 and now h4. This provides the facility to put pressure on black's king side and maybe play h5 later, but also rook h3 to g3 could be annoying. We see c5, knight f3, h6, and now h5, knight e7. So it seems, for the moment at least, the f5 square is an interesting, strategically important square for black. If instead, by the way here, c takes, then white has knight b5 and can reach a very comfortable position here. So you don't have to occupy the centre with pawns, as Nimzovich has highlighted. You can replace that with pieces and still control squares quite in a solid manner here, as an example. So knight e7, we have knight going back to e2. So this is a curious move, shying away maybe from a bishop exchange sometimes. Sometimes knight f4 might be useful, but also it unlocks the potential of c3 to guard the pawn chain, like with a pawn on c3. We have knight ec6 and c3. So white has a space advantage. We have a5, b3. So now with this, if a4, b4 seems appropriate, we have knight a6, rook h3, knight c7, a4, bishop a6, rook g3, queen d7, queen c2. So a very positional position, very strategic in nature, this position. There's an absence of very dangerous forcing variations at the moment, it seems. Queen c8, bishop d2, c4 now is played. Here, Leela plays knight f4. Actually, it turns out here, b takes isn't so bad either, it seems. This position, where knight h2 can be played against this battery, could end up being fairly pleasant for white as well. So knight f4 anyway was played here. We have c takes, queen takes, and the king is prepared to collect the bishop on bishop takes. We have queen b7, rook b1. Black is suffering a little bit here. This rook on g3 is tying up the f8 bishop. In principle, white wants to sometimes exchange off strategically the dark square bishops. And especially when a move like b5 might be played later, then c5 would be more important if first the dark square bishops were exchanged off. We have rook b8 as if there is an enthusiasm for b5. So there is a kind of longer term downside of playing b5 potentially. Queen d1, queen c8, rook a1, queen b7, bishop c1, as though bishop a3 might be on the cards. We have b5 here. So this gets ready actually. Bishop a3 does b4 as an option at least. We have a takes, bishop takes b5. Now actually knight d2 is played. Queen a6, bishop takes, knight takes, knight e2. The rook's already protecting c3. That's not a major concern. So where is the knight heading now? Going back. Let's see. King f1. It lets the king, it's built a bridge for the king to go over here. That's one perk. So king g1. The king has manually castled. Knight f5. The rook moves. Rook a8. And now this knight is challenged. And here is a first interesting structural concession from Stockfish. We see bishop e7. It turns out here that if knight e7, bishop a3 is rather good. The aforementioned strategic exchange that white's interested in is the exchange of dark square bishops. If that occurs here, it seems knight b3 is a very good move, not just for the prospect of simply winning a pawn, but even knight c5, and that's strong for white. But white could also just win a pawn with rook takes and then actually get back to c5 anyway. This kind of position with a knight sitting on a dark square like this is very advantageous for white. So anyway, we have bishop e7, so black is accepting doubled pawns potentially, but knight f1 is played, not knight takes f5. Not immediately. Knight f1, and black castles, so the invitation for knight takes g3 is here, but Stockfish doesn't accept that invitation. Stockfish castles. One of the reasons maybe is that after knight takes, there's rook takes g3, and there's a welcome committee after castling in the form of bishop takes h6 with a big advantage for white. And here, if bishop f8, then actually it turns out here a strong move, believe it or not, is rook a4 in this position, with the idea of playing later for queen a1. This rather nifty idea, where white's pieces are pretty good, can be extended actually now with c4 extending white's advantage, and the queen actually looks after d4, and white's actually progressing a big advantage here, for example like this, winning material. So a very, very interesting scenario. You can see how the space advantage in conjunction with c4 can be used to extend white's advantage. So black castled, and now we have this structural damage inflicted. And now rook f3, king h8. So offering f5 here, but does white really want to take that with rook? Is it poisoned in some way? If g6 had been played, the thing is there's bishop takes h6. And the other thing is, it seems pointless to try and protect this because of knight g3 anyway. Knight g3 if queen e6, things like that. So king h8 just giving up the pawn. But knight g3 was played. Better to take with a knight. f4, giving up the pawn, really saying to white, please just take the pawn, take the pawn. If g6 again, then again bishop takes h6 is relevant. So f4, giving up the pawn, knight e6. At least black seems to have a blockade potential. The bishop drops back, queen b7, and now knight f5. A mighty knight on f5. Knight f5, as Ben Feingold says, and other grandmasters sometimes. Rook fd8, we have rook g3. a4 is played. This is a tricky position indeed. If bishop f8, then queen g4 seems strong, and there's numerous threats here. One, for example, threat with this battery is bishop takes, because if takes, then there's queen g8. So say this, knight takes as well as bishop takes is on the cards, or bishop takes. So it's a very interesting position here tactically. If bishop e7, at least indirectly, opening up protection for g8, it turns out here queen f3 is a strong move. It actually unveils numerous threats and ideas like c4 by pinning that pawn, and also knight takes and bishop takes being dangerous, and knight takes g7. All of these are kind of made more effective with the move queen f3, believe it or not. As an example, rook a7, knight takes, and then bishop takes. And this is a very strong attacking scenario. For example, like this, you can see that it's very difficult for the black king to be defended. So that gives a gist of things there. So anyway, a4 was played. And here we have knight takes e7. White can't really do a hack attack here, by the way. This doesn't really work out well. Immediately knight f5, forking with advantage. So knight takes e7, queen takes. Rook takes a4, winning another pawn. Yes, this seems all rather strange and desperate from Stockfish. Now, it is 2 pawns down. The only thing to show is a tricky knight versus the bishop. We have queen h4, queen d1, protecting the h5 pawn. Rook c8, that's reinforced as well. It's already protected though as well. We have rook a8, bishop e3, rook a6, and now a period of, it seems, some shuffling around, high level shuffling. So we get some maneuvering here, or high level shuffling. And yes, there's a period where it seems the pieces right now are in front of these pawns, and really the pawns need to be in front of the pieces. After queen d7, volunteering the exchange of queens, because things are starting to build up here on the king side, it seems Stockfish felt the queen exchange was the appropriate thing to do here. There are interesting possibilities as well, by the way, of bishop g3 and bishop h4, as well as rook g3. Anyway, so black, Stockfish, decided the queen exchange was interesting, but now g4, and the pawns are actually going to get in front of the pieces now, like this. So f4 here, and we have f5, and now we're going to soon get 4 pawns in a row and I thought this was an interesting visual effect. I stepped out for a bit while watching the live thing and came back to these 4 pawns in a row. I thought, wow, 4 pawns in a row like this. Visually, special effects. Okay, so h takes, bishop takes. We have rook b3. The bishop comes back to protect c3. Rook b2, king h3, unpinning. Unpinning is quite often a useful tactic in its own right. King g3, knight a3. King g4, knight b1, bishop e1. Moving away from the threat. Knight a3, bishop g3, rook g2. Rook e3, knight c2. Rook f3, rook e2. So black is being annoying, but black is material down here. So e6, creating a dangerous passed pawn. Protected passed pawn now. So that's a big asset in the position. And white is definitely making some progress now after c4, trying to get 2 connected passed pawns. Black dare not take. Black played knight b4. If black took here, then 2 connected passed pawns is usually generally regarded as a winning strategic game pattern. And here it does indeed seem to do the job quite well. So knight b4 bypassing that kind of painful stuff for the moment. Bishop e1, but knight c2, and in fact, black resigned. It felt the threshold was too high here. The threat on d4 can actually be ignored if this game continued, and the bishop, in fact, both of these threats can be actually ignored in this situation by playing c takes d. The power of the 2 connected passed pawns is revealed after rook a3, and then check, and then e7. So this pawn will be queening soon. For example, like this, and it's totally hopeless for black. So I hope you enjoyed that. I have a trivia question for you guys today. Do you love computers in general, or do you dislike them mostly? And I'm not just talking about chess computers, but if you've got a bit more time, yeah, what about chess computers as well? Chess playing programs. Do you like them in general, or do you hate them? But also, the more general question is, do you love computers in general, or do you dislike them mostly? That's my trivia question for you today. So help me boost the video through comments. And it's interesting to engage you on YouTube to see what you think about that. Okay, very interesting game. Philosophical points. Okay, the French defense with knight g8. I think at engine level, this engine level, it seems a bit fragile. I have to say, a lot of openings are going to be relabeled as fragile or unsound because of this AI revolution in chess. It's just getting stronger and stronger. But that doesn't mean, as humans, we can't always play, blitz chess online or over the board. And what makes chess wonderful for humans to play is it's always going to be blunderful, because people tire, people make blunders. We're not computers unless we get implants. But I think that should be avoided, because otherwise there might be an increase in draws. But in general, what makes chess wonderful for humans, in my view, is its blunderfulness nature. But at this level, it seems, Tigran Petrosian might have been able to draw with it in his day, but it's just too much. It's just too much, even for the mighty Stockfish to handle this position, it seems. Jerome's done a good hatchet job on both engines, I believe. But yeah, there'll be some suspense for the rematch. Yeah, did Stockfish manage to beat Leela in the rematch? I know, this is a cliff edge. Suspense. I know, you can't wait till the next episode to find out the answer to that one. No, seriously, yeah. Okay, yeah, great suspense there. So anyway, so do you like computers in general, or do you hate them? That's the trivia question today. And yeah, I should have put my links there, but there's a link, Kingscrusher TV /opening tango, if you want to check out my new course at Udemy. It's doing well, 4.8. So kingscrusher.tv /opening tango. Check that out. That's an amazing course. A lot of insight there. If you like the insights from my videos generally, my passion is generally reflected in this course I did. Over 10 hours of video content, so check that out. Okay, Comments, questions, like, share, subscribe with the notification bell, always appreciated as well. Thanks very much.